The 80s marked a turning point in American culture where illicit drug use was under the microscope. Upon focus, the sample size of the world of professional sports provided insight into just how ravaged society was by drugs. In response, commercial breaks during sporting events began to look like this.
Cocaine's no way to believe in yourself. It can kill you.
I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
That's right. Say no to crack so you can live.
If you're doing it, stop it. Get some help.
Say no to drugs. Baseball cares about you and your family.
As you may know, in 1985, the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, yes, even the mascot, found itself in the center of professional baseball's biggest scandal in 70 years. And at the center of that was the tragic story of pitcher Rod Scurry. Due to the high-profile nature of the drug trials, Scurry's on-field acumen has gone super underappreciated, especially his curveball. Opposing batters... Wait, should I say it? Opposing batters thought Rod's breaking ball was Scurry. Alright, all serious from here on out, I know. Rod Scurry was born in Sacramento, California in 1956. His family moved to Reno, Nevada while he was young. His dedication to the game of baseball was evident from an early age. He'd stack old mattresses up against his backyard fence and throw into them. I believe this story also shows the formative years of the personality he displayed during his playing days. Quiet and somewhat withdrawn, choosing to perfect his game in solitude rather than at the neighborhood sandlot. His desire to get in extra pitching work would continue into his days at Hug High School, where he'd get up at 5:30 a.m., jog to the school, rain or shine or snow, and get in some throws before the bell rang for class. Once in class, he admittedly studied flashcards he'd made of opposing batters he'd face. This strategy worked, as a complete game effort with 17 to 20 strikeouts was the norm for Rod in high school. The Pittsburgh Pirates took notice and signed him with their first pick in 1974, 11th overall. A few notable picks from in front of him: his future Pirates teammate, infielder Bill Allman, went first overall to the Padres. The Phillies chose Lonnie Smith third overall. His career would later become intertwined with Scurry's as a player implicated in the Pittsburgh Drug Trials. Tom Brennan went fourth. Brennan was known as the Gray Flamingo because of his unorthodox pause in his delivery. Cool, obscure player. Indians, White Sox, Dodgers for your immaculate grid consideration. Dale Murphy went fifth to the Braves. The Brewers selected a candidate for most badass baseball name in Butch Edge. In 1979, as Sister Sledge rang out through Three Rivers Stadium and the Pirates campaigned toward their eventual World Series victory, Scurry waited in the weeds as the ace of the Portland Beavers of the Pacific Coast League. In 1980, he'd appear in 20 games out of the bullpen. In 1981, he got his gig in the starting rotation, getting his first win by shutting out the Astros through 7 innings. The Pittsburgh Press reported that Scurry had been too excited to sleep the night before his first major league start. Pitching coach Harvey Haddix added that sleep was not necessary before a good outing. In fact, it may help as you take it out on the opposing lineup. Unbeknownst to Haddix, it wasn't just anxiousness. Scurry had done cocaine that night, and again before the game for good measure. He was high while pitching an absolute gem. Seems that happened a few times in the Pirates organization, shout out Doc Ellis. Fellow reliever Don Robinson was likely the first to recognize Scurry's problem, holding multiple interventions for Rod, offering to arrange rehab for him, and even offering to allow him to stay at his home while he sobered up. His efforts would prove unsuccessful. Due to the Pirates' wealth of pitching depth, Scurry would only start 6 more games that season before being relegated back to the bullpen, forming a two-headed monster of sorts with prime Kent Tekulve. 1982 was nothing short of remarkable for Scurry, as he posted a 1.74 ERA, appearing in 76 games, but this season marked the beginning of the downward spiral for the Pirates in the 80s. Willie Stargell stepped away mid-season, and attendance ranked last in the National League. It was around this time that Scurry bolstered his friend group, whose activities centered around heavy drinking and cocaine use. Baseball royalty shortstop Berra's name is a constant in these stories. Kevin Coke, yes, Coke, also known as the Pirate Parrot, befriended Scurry, as did Coke's friend from high school, Dale Schiffman, a die-hard Pittsburgh sports fan who was elated to hang out with members of the team. Once it was established among team members that Schiffman was a reliable source to obtain the drug, it was all downhill from there, or perhaps uphill given the angle of the human nostril. Schiffman would deliver cocaine straight to the ballpark. Stadium staff began to recognize him, and he'd subtly slip some powder into the baseball gloves of his clients. Note, this wasn't at all isolated in Pittsburgh. Drugs were rampant across baseball. The infamous greenies were a part of a lot of pregame rituals, but John Milner recalled that he, Scurry, Berra, Dave Parker, and Lee Lacy would go through 7 grams a week of cocaine. That seems significant. Kevin Connolly, an HVAC repairman, would take over as Scurry's primary dealer. In his eyes, the drug was so pervasive that it almost seemed there was no consequences involved with it. To keep the Pirates' parties going strong, Connolly arranged to travel to Miami and exchange $42 grand for 2 kilos of cocaine, and he'd return every couple months. These high-stakes missions provided him a level of adrenaline that the cocaine could not, and he'd begin to make a name for himself around the city. In 1985, baseball was on trial, and the Pirates organization suffered badly, both literally and figuratively. They lost 104 games and manager Chuck Tanner was fired, with high-profile reports from court overshadowing the sparse highlights on the field. Kevin Connolly was sentenced to 2.5 years. They came down hardest on Dale Schiffman, who was sentenced to 12 years, ultimately serving 2 in federal prison. A lot of the evidence on Schiffman had been gathered by one of his oldest friends, Kevin Coke, the Parrot, who had been wearing a wire. While in prison, Schiffman found religion and ultimately forgave Coke, as seen on this Bryant Gumbel report. Schiffman was outspoken about how prosecution for the players was a slap on the wrist comparatively. 7 players who had used drugs habitually and facilitated use by other players faced a 1-year suspension, which, by the way, they continued to play baseball. Their pay was just docked 10%, and they had to do 100 hours of community service related to drug outreach. It's kind of funny to juxtapose Keith Hernandez as a sort of power-hitting poster boy for drug-related legal trouble in retrospect against, say, Mark McGuire as the steroid trials guy. The difference in musculature is just so evident of what drugs they were on, and statistically, of course, 80's baseball is known for its small ball and lack of power. Anyway, back to trial. 4 players were quote-unquote suspended for 60 days. Lee Lacy, Al Holland, Larry Sorenson, and Claudell Washington. Those implicated but seeing no punishment were Rod Scurry, Vida Blue, Dusty Baker, Dickie Noles, Tim Raines, and Alan Wiggins, among others. Rod Scurry was purchased by the Yankees at the tail end of the '85 season and would sign with them in free agency for '86. With Dave Righetti filling the role of lefty closer who wore number 19, Scurry fell into a more supplementary role. He cleaned up his appearance as per Yankees team rules. He failed to clean up his lifestyle, finding American League drug connections with relative ease. He played AAA ball in the Giants organization in '87 and was traded to the Mariners in 1988 following several injuries on their pitching staff. His 39 appearances for Seattle were less than spectacular, and they would be his last. He was released by the Mariners on December 21st. The next day, he was arrested for buying crack at a crack house in Nevada. On October 29, 1992, police responded to a call from Rod's neighbor. They arrived to find Rod outside his home, disoriented, complaining that snakes were inside his home, crawling all over him and biting him. There were no snakes. Scurry was in the midst of a drug-induced delusion that he would not escape from. He became belligerent and resisted as police tried to restrain him. He stopped breathing. He was kept alive artificially for a few days at the hospital, but never returned to consciousness. His official cause of death was a cocaine-related heart attack. He was 36 years old. If you or anyone you know are experiencing issues with substance abuse, please get help. Don't be afraid to ask for it.